In this lesson, we're going to have a look at layering vinyl. Now, theoretically, you shouldn't put one layer on top of another layer when you are using the heat transfer vinyl, simply because it will make the design too thick. However, in Canvas Workspace, there are tools that we can use to create a layered effect. So to demonstrate this, I'm going to go and import a file from my cutting machine. Now bear in mind, I am on Canvas Workspace for the PC, which is offline. However, I have now connected to the Wi-Fi so that I can import an FCM file from the cutting machine. So there is the first file. Now I'm going to quickly go over to the ScanNCut and I'm going to send a second file. So I've selected my design and I am going to say transfer wirelessly, and then I'm going to say import from the cutting machine, and there comes my second design. Now I need both of these designs so that I can show you the tool options. Now let's have a look at the first design that I imported. So I'm going to just zoom in a little bit. So I hold my control button in and I roll my mouse wheel up. Now if you can imagine, I'm going to be cutting the bottom part of this ice cream cone from one color vinyl and then the top part from a different color vinyl. Now just so that I can see what's going on here, I'm going to actually go to the properties and I'm going to change the color of that cone to, say, that orangey color. So I would cut it out of that color vinyl. Now remember, the ScanNCut's not going to see any color. The color is purely here so that I can see what my finished design will look like. Then the top part, I'm going to change that and I'm going to make it perhaps a pale pink, because we'll pretend it's strawberry ice cream. So now I'll cut the bottom part and then I will secure that onto my garment or whatever project that I'm going to secure it to. Then what I'll do is I'll take the top part and I'll pop that down. Now in this instance, I don't want any gaps, so I'll just layer the pink over the orangey part just by about 1 millimeter or 2. So that's not really layering as such, because these two are only going to overlap very slightly. However, if we go to the other design that I imported, which is this one here, the design consists of a stick for the lollipop, then the lollipop itself, and then there is a swirl that's going to go onto the lollipop. So here, this is definitely going to be a layer that's going to be going on top of the lollipop. So now we're going to go and have a look at how we can do this without actually layering. So just before we start, I'm just going to move the ice cream cone out of the way so that we can see how we're going to work with this. So for the lollipop stick, I can go to my properties and I can change that and I can make the stick, for example, a brown color. Then that would mean I'm going to cut that piece from a brown vinyl. Then this part here I'm going to cut from a red vinyl. So I change that to red, and then this part here I'm going to change the color to a yellow. So now when I cut out, I'm going to have the stick, then I'm going to have the lollipop that fits over the stick. So like with the ice cream cone here, I can overlap the lollipop over the stick for about 2 millimeters so that I don't have any gaps. But now this part here is going to be popped on top of the red part. Now theoretically, it's not a good idea to layer one piece on top of another piece in a situation like this. So what we are going to do now is we are going to start using some of our tools. So in the end product will look as if it's layered, but it actually isn't. So first of all, let's just move the red part up there, and we're going to pop the yellow on top of it where we think it should be. And you can rotate and resize. So for example, if you would prefer your lollipop to look like that, you can rotate, you can make it bigger or smaller, whatever you want to do. So get everything perfect, because now what we're going to do is we're going to select the yellow part, and then we're going to select the red part. But now we need to hold shift in and select the red part. Now we're going to go to the editing function, and what we're going to do is we're going to go down here and we're going to remove the overlaps. So we click on remove overlaps. Now if I take the yellow bit, you'll see it's actually cut the yellow out of the red. So when I iron the red onto my garment, I'll first start with the brown stick, then I'll just overlap the red slightly by about 2 millimeters, so there's no gap. But now when I come to put the yellow on top of the red, I may have a problem in the sense that the red might shrink slightly, and it does shrink ever so slightly while you are applying the heat. So what will happen is that this white gap here is going to move a little bit. So if I take the yellow bit and I put it on, I might find that I'll have some little gaps here and there. So now to stop that from happening, what we're going to do is we're going to make this yellow bit a little bit bigger, so that when we pop it on, it's going to overlap those white pieces by about 1 millimeter. So let's go and have a look at how we make this part bigger. To make this yellow piece a little bit bigger, what we're going to do is we're still in the editing mode, and we are going to just scroll down and we're going to go to offset, and we're going to create an offset line. Now here you can say how big that offset line should be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set it to about 1.2 millimeters, because then that will be more than big enough to create a slight overlap without there being too much of an overlap. Now I can choose whether I want it on the outside. Now obviously we do want it around all the outside lines, and it is curved, so I've got that set to round, but you could also change that to bevel. And then you're going to just click on OK. So now you can see, if I zoom in, that it has created that offset line all the way around, but it's separate to this. So this one I can actually just delete, but I'm going to put it back just so that I can demonstrate something. And this one I'm now going to go back up here, and I'm going to change that color to yellow. So now you can see the difference between the two. This is 1.2 millimeters wider along the edges there on the outside, as well as on the outside there. So if I take this and I pop it over the red, it's going to more than sufficiently cover it. So it's not too much of an overlap, but it's just enough of an overlap so that we don't have any gaps in our design. Whereas if I take this one now, you'll see you'd have to be incredibly careful about how you placed it, and if the layer at the bottom had shrunk a little bit, you will have a problem. So it's always safest to create that offset line and then make a new part. So that is how you can create a layered look without it actually being a proper layer. Now this is a very simple design, so now we're going to go and have a look at a slightly more advanced design. But just before we move away from here, I'm going to also show you that you could go to the layer tool, and you'll be able to see that the yellow is on top of the red, and then the red is on top of the brown. So now, say for example, I wanted the red to be on top of the yellow, because I could also do it that way around. I can just swap those two around, and now you'll see that you don't notice that the yellow has been made larger, because the red will now go on top of the yellow. So you would position the yellow first and then the red on top of that. So you can change the order that your design is in here in the layers, just so that you can see exactly what's going to come first, what's going to come second, and then it gives you a much better picture. But obviously when you send it to the cutting machine, you're going to send these as 3 separate pieces, and then if we're going to do the little ice cream cone, they would also get sent as 2 separate pieces. Then I would load my vinyl on my mat in all of these colors and cut each piece out. And also remember that if it is something that is a design that is either orientated to the left or the right, or you have writing, then you need to make sure that before you send it to your ScanNCut machine, that you actually flip everything over, because you're going to be cutting your vinyl out with the right side facing towards the mat. So always remember to go and flip first. Now we're going to take a look at doing a slightly more complex design so that we can use some more of our tools. So the first thing I'm going to do is import from the cutting machine the FCM file of the ladybug. Now this is one of the designs that is built in on the machine. So I've just sent it across wirelessly, and I've selected them together because I want to make them a bit bigger. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this little part down here, because this is going to be cut from black vinyl. So I go up to my properties, I go to the fill color, and I'm going to fill it with black. Now this part here I would like to fill in red, because the red is going to go over the black so that the black shows through these little holes. However, if I simply go across to the full color and I tell it to fill that with red, all the little holes disappear. So that's not a good plan. So let's just undo that move, and I'm going to show you how to fix that problem. The first thing you're going to do is select the part, and then we're going to go to our editing tools, and we're going to go to the divide tool. Now the reason that we're doing that is that we want to divide these little bits up so that we can remove them, because at the moment what it's done is it's actually divided this up, or cut them out, in other words. So to show you what's happened, if I grab a hold of this part and I move it down, you'll see all the little bits that were divided out or cut out are left behind. So these we don't need anymore, so we select them all together and delete them. Now if I go back to my properties and I fill that with red, it fills everything except the little holes which had been cut out. So if you need to cut anything out, you will always use that divide tool, but always remember to move the main part away so that you can delete all the little bits that are left behind. Now if I take this red part and I pop it on top of the black part, that is exactly how I imagined my ladybug to look. So let's just zoom in a little bit here, because now I want to show you something else. If I simply ironed the black bit onto my project and then I took the red vinyl and I ironed that on top of the black, I would have these two layers, one on top of the other, which is not a good idea. So we are going to use our remove overlap tool like we did with the lollipop. However, what I'm first going to do is I'm going to make this red part just a little bit bigger, and I'm just going to stretch it a little bit. Now the reason that I'm doing this is that if I move this away, you'll see I've got all of these little edges here. Now I've got to make sure that the black is on top of all of that, and so that I don't take 4 hours to do it, I just make this a little bit bigger, and then I know that it's done. So now if I select the red bit, hold shift, select the black bit, and I go to my editing tools and I say remove overlaps, if I move the red bit away, you'll see it's cut all those excess black bits out, and that is exactly what I want. So now if I go and I iron the black bits onto my project, then I come across and I iron the red bit on top, I'm going to be faced with that same problem that I had with the lollipop. In other words, if the black bit shrinks a little bit and I pop the red over it, I might end up with little gaps like that. And that's not going to look very nice. So what we need to do, like with the lollipop, is we are going to create an offset line around all the black bits. So I'm going to just select all the black bits together, and then I'm going to go to offset. So let's just scroll down here, go to offset, and I'm going to leave the spacing at 1.1 millimeter. It's going to go around the outside edges, and they are rounded shapes, so everything's set perfectly, so I say OK. Now if I zoom in, you'll see it's created that offset around all of those black bits, but I need to get rid of the solid black bits because I only want the shapes that have been created by that offset line. So this is where the layering tool is wonderful, because right down here I can see all the black bits together. So I just click on them over here and then I hit delete and they'll all disappear. Now you'll also see that it has grouped. You'll see there's the word group, and all these little black bits are all grouped together. So now it's easy just to click on that because they are all grouped. Go back to the properties and then go to the fill color and fill them all with black. So there they are. So it's all done. Now once I have pressed those onto my project, I can then come and take my red vinyl and press that on. But if I do this now, you'll see that the black is actually in front of the red. So it's not a problem. You just right click and say arrange and bring to the front. So now it's brought the red to the front. So that is how it will look once it is done. Now we already know about our little tools that we can use to, and we'll just click on that quickly. We know about our path editing tools. Now remember, I made this red part a little bit bigger. So now what I can do is I just click on the red bit and I click on the line, and all those little path editing tools pop up again. So now with this red bit that's sticking out a bit beyond the black, I can go in there and I can actually pull that in if I wanted to. So now this is being kind of super picky, but the reason that I'm doing it is to show you that you can change things just as you want them to be simply by using your tools. So we'll just go and move these in here a little bit, and there it is, done. So now I don't have those extra bits sticking out. So this now would have shown you how to use some extra tools like your divide tool, and then also recapping on tools that we have already used. So if I take this part here now, I would simply send this off to my cutting machine, cut that from my black vinyl, that from my red vinyl, press this onto my project, then take that part, position it on top and press that over, and I'll have no gaps. Now we're going to take a look at creating shading or shadowing behind text, which would also involve removing overlaps if we are working with heat transfer vinyl. So I'm going to go to my text tool. I have already selected the font that I want, which is the freestyle script, and then I'm going to type my word. So off I go, and I type the word that I want. So now to release that text tool, I click anywhere outside the box. Now I want to just make that a little bit larger, and then what I'm going to do is I want to separate these letters. So I go to my editing tools and I say divide. So now each letter is separate, and now I can drag those letters, because what I want to do is I want to just overlap everything slightly so that I can weld them together. Now you don't have to do this. I'm doing this just for the exercise so that we can go over all of the things that we've learnt up to this point. So off I go, and I just move those letters, and you need to click on the letter itself so that you can move it. There we go. Right, so now I'm happy with that. So what I'm going to do next is I will just first of all select all of the word happy together, and once I've selected that, just click on the little outline of the box so that you can say group. Then we do the same over here, so we just drag the mouse, but you need to click on that line to say group. Now I can move this grouped word closer to the second grouped word. Now what I want to do is I want to weld these together, so I say weld, and I want to weld these together, so I say weld. Now if I zoom in, so I just hold my control button in on my keyboard and I can zoom in, I can see that there's a funny little kink here. So we want to sort that out, so we're going to click on one of the lines of the word, so any one of those lines, and that will allow us to access the path editing tools. So I'm just going to zoom in a little bit more, because over here I want to highlight some of those little nodes, and I want to just delete them so that I can create a nice smooth curve. So once I am satisfied with that curve, then I can just zoom out again and click anywhere outside of the box. Now I zoomed right out. There we go. Right, so I can see that everything else looks pretty okay. So now what I want to do is I want to just join these two words together. So I just right click and then just click on one of the lines of the box, because then it will allow you to select group. So now this is one word. I need to also change the color of the word, so I want to make the word red. So I say OK, and then I want to get rid of the outline, so I click on there, and now the outline has gone. Now the next thing that I want to do is I want to duplicate this word to create the shadow. So I right click and I say duplicate, but I want that word to be black. So I am now going to make sure I'm on properties, go to the color, and I could select a dark gray or a black or whatever. I'm going to select the black because there is more of a contrast. So now the black is in front of the red. So what I'm going to do is I can click on the red one and I can say arrange and say bring to the front. So now I can pop the one on top of the other, and I can see that that would create a very nice shaded or shadowed effect. So what I want to do next is, if I cut out the black vinyl and I pressed it onto my surface, my garment or whatever it is. And then I come and I take my red one and I position it on top of that. I'm going to be having an overlap of vinyl, which would make the garment or whatever it is feel a lot thicker. So ideally I need to remove those overlaps. So what I'm going to do is I just position these until I'm happy with the layout. Then I'm going to hold in my shift button and select the letters at the back. So now you can see I've got two boxes around the words, one for the red letters and one for the black letters. So now I'm going to go back to my editing tools and I'm going to say remove overlaps. So now if I come to my words here, my red ones, and I move them away, you'll see that it has removed where the red was overlapping the black. Now one thing to be careful of is that it ungroups the words again. So click on each one because you'll be able to see if they have been separated, and then just right click and say group again, because when you cut this out you don't want these to have moved apart. And likewise over here, if I drag a box around, you'll see there are two separate boxes, so I want to group those again as well. So I right click and I say group. So now it doesn't matter where I move this to or where I move this to, they are grouped. So I could now just go and cut out my black letters, iron them onto the garments, and then pop this one back on top. Now it's not really necessary to go and create offsets, because when you are doing your lining up of your vinyl you can see exactly where you want it to be and you can position it so that you don't have any gaps. However, if you prefer, you can go to the one at the back and then you can also still create that offset line, and you can make it as small as 1 millimeter. So if I did that, let's have a look at what that result would be. We just say OK. So now you'll see it's put lines around every little part of that. Now what I want to do is I want to get rid of those back pieces. So this is where I can go into my layering, because it's going to be difficult to pick out the black pieces from the new pieces that have been created with the offset lines. So I can go into the layering tool and I can go and I can find those black pieces there, and I can just say delete. So now I'm left just with those thicker outlines. So I select them and then I'm going to go to my properties tool and I'm going to fill them in with black again, and I can remove the outline because I don't need that. And now you'll see it's a much bolder shadowing. So once again it's ungrouped them, so just keep checking for that and then right click and say group, because now if I put this on top of that you'll see that it's brought the black to the front. So we want to right click on this and say arrange and say bring to the front, so that when we pop that on top of there you can see the result. So it's created a much thicker outline at the back. So if that's what you want, that is also how you can do it, simply by using that offset tool. So what you now are going to do is just rearrange these so that you can send this to your cutting machine to cut your red vinyl and to cut your black vinyl, and then finally put them together. So it's very important to know about your layering tools, your coloring tools, and then obviously all of your editing tools. So play around with different types of text and create all sorts of interesting effects. Now obviously, because this would be cut from, if you're cutting this from vinyl, then you must also remember to go to your editing tools and flip your design before you send it through to the ScanNCut so that it will cut it in reverse. So that's just another important thing to remember. The general rule when you're working with glitter vinyl, as you'll see in this photograph here, is that glitter vinyl can go on top of regular vinyl, like in the case of this photograph as well. You'll see that I have put glitter vinyl on top of regular vinyl, but I have also still used the remove overlap tool so that there is very little overlap. Now theoretically, glitter should not be layered over glitter purely because of its rough surface. So the glitter that's underneath won't allow the glitter layer that's on top to stick firmly enough to it. However, I have used the remove overlap tool, and this is a cushion, so it's not like a garment that's going to be washed as repeatedly. So there are instances where you can do that, especially if it's going to be purely for a decorative purpose. Now in this example, it looks as if I have layered regular vinyl over glitter vinyl, but if you look carefully, you'll see that I actually increased the size of the holes of the red vinyl, so there is a slight gap around the glitter pieces. So in fact, it just looks as if it's overlapping, but it's in fact not overlapping. But it still creates the illusion of overlapping. So you can always manipulate your designs to create the illusion of overlaps, although they aren't overlapped. Now the general rule when layering with metallic vinyl is that you shouldn't layer metallic on top of metallic. So in the instance of this design, I used the remove overlap tool, and then that separated the wings from the body. Then with that metallic body that I have put on there, I created an offset line of 1 millimeter, so the metallic is only overlapping over the regular vinyl for about 1 millimeter.